my name is Tenley. I work in the Alumni office. I'm the assistant director. So I actually work and do a lot with student alumni programs. So getting alumni and students interacting together. So this is the Alumni Career Connections. We partner with the Fleischman Center. So that's why Lindsay Mertland is here. She's our Fleischman rep. And we are so glad to have Rupert with us to kind of share his story. And then the four of you, feel free to ask any questions. So what we'll do is Rupert will give a little overview of his time from Binghamton to where he is now. And then we'll open it up to questions. So if you all have questions about different parts of what Rupert has said or about what he's currently doing with his career, feel free to ask away.
Okay, should I get started?
Sure, go for it.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Binghamton alum from 2014 was my graduation date, which, wow, it's almost 6 years. It seemed like just yesterday. I was an electrical engineering major in Watson, bit of a non-traditional college student. Prior to college, I actually worked for about 3 or 4 years in finance as a stockbroker. I was one of the youngest stockbrokers there. As an engineer now, I'm actually on my second career, oddly enough, given my age. During my time in Binghamton, as far as like extracurricular activities go, I was a member of NSBE, which is the resource group for National Society for Black Engineers. I was a part of the Math Honor Society. I also, one of the real impactful experiences I had during the summer, I worked as a tutor counselor for Upward Bound. I'm not sure, is that Upward Bound still present at Binghamton?
I think so.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, so Upward Bound it's a college prep program for students that for high school students that don't really do well on their Regents exams, and as you stay there with them for the summer, helping them, coaching them, and just providing mentorship to them. And I found that like extremely fulfilling, so much that I even applied to, they had me as a tutor counselor the first year, and then I was a head counselor the following year. And in my junior and senior year, the director for Upward Bound actually left the company and brought me in to work with him at the Binghamton High School. So I really, really loved working with high school students. And, that really started a spark for me as far as helping students and really trying to, to provide advice, that I wish that I got when I was coming up and going through, school and life and, after college. Following Binghamton, I got a job. I was recruited, one of the only 2 people recruited, myself and a friend of mine actually, to work at a nuclear power plant for a company called Exelon. Oddly enough, right after we got hired, they stopped recruiting from Binghamton, which I guess it worked out for us. It was a really, so it was a short window of opportunity. But during that time, I was a system engineer for the high voltage power distribution. So everything from the 120 volt AC, for, the different devices that they plug into the wall or light bulbs, all the way up through the, emergency power, the 345 kV AC distribution going out to the grid, including the generator and including all the reactor trip systems. So that was really interesting. It taught me a lot as far as attention to detail. A little fun fact, every day going into work, it was basically, you had to go through a X-ray, handprint scanner, bomb detection, and then you had to go through a turnstile before you even got to your desk. So it was a tremendous amount of security that oddly you actually get used to, which is pretty crazy. There was following that, I worked and I was selected to lead a group called the NAYGN, which is the National Association for Young Generation in Nuclear. It's an employee resource group. So we had one at the station. I spearheaded a charity fundraiser that we raised about $80,000 for the local community. And we actually we kicked off really a community service arm, so to speak, where we would go out to the community and educate folks on nuclear power, but also educate students on the different paths to becoming an engineer. So really just taking that experience that I had from Binghamton of working with students, just trying to translate it, into my work life, as an extracurricular activity. I found that very, very beneficial for me. And on the note of just really challenging myself, I found that, based on my trajectory, I went to school in Binghamton. At that point, I was living in Oswego. The next step would have been living in Canada. So I had to reframe and try to do something different because I didn't really like the cold as much. So I decided to, look for another challenge. And one challenge was working at, Con Edison. My logic at the time was, biggest city, in the country, the oldest and the most dense electrical grid in the world. It's obviously going to be a tremendous amount of equipment. It's going to be a very big challenge, but if you can make it there, like they say, you can make it anywhere, right? And so I've been, working here at Con Edison for the past, going on 4 years now as a substation equipment and field engineer. During my first 2 years, I was a field engineer for all of Manhattan substation equipment. So cliff notes on what that entails when things break or they blow up or they fail without blowing up. I would go there, make an assessment of what the damage was, make recommendations for how to repair it, provide the testing recommendations, and also provide any decommissioning or any other additional recommendations, as far as testing the equipment, as far as putting everything back in service, as far as, looking at any long-term, I would say, structural components that we would need to change as far as like procuring the equipment, if it's a latent design issue or things like that, but also, again, with along the same vein of personal improvement and just continuing to challenge myself, I wanted to continue to grow. So, in looking at what else I wanted to do to provide value and to really provide my own internal fulfillment, I started a number of projects. The very first project that I started right after I moved back to New York City was a company called Rabbit Read. The goal for that company was to make textbooks 99% cheaper than they currently were. My first experience with buying college textbooks was a $600 inorganic chemistry textbook that they wanted to give me $6 for at the end of the semester. I thought it was pretty crazy, so I wanted to do something to help to try to change that. And so we worked on Rabbit Read with a few friends for about a year. Ultimately, we ended up dissolving the company due to just a significant technical challenges with trying to structure interactive textbooks, but also more importantly, the licensing and from a business perspective, it just wasn't very attractive. As far as getting textbooks and licensing textbooks, it's much harder than we initially anticipated. And so we made a pivot. Following Rabbit Read, I started a company called Applaud, which the goal for Applaud was to provide disadvantaged students with non-traditional life skills. So, what you'll find, when you graduate, there's going to be a tremendous amount of things that you didn't learn in school. How do you buy a house? How do you file your taxes? How do you invest? How do you network? To some extent, how do you, correctly, edit your resume? Granted, you have these resources at Binghamton, but as once you're outside of college, you have to try to garner this experience through your own personal network. And depending on an individual, if they lack that personal network, through their family or through their friends, they're at an inherent disadvantage compared to someone that does. And so I decided to try to fill that gap and create a platform to provide, individuals with some kind of structured approach to these specific life skills. So we started Applaud in 2017. And really how I started it was I said, okay, I wanted to do presentations in high schools. So how do I do that? I, reached out to everyone that I knew that worked at a high school. And I called all my friends, and eventually I found one high school that allowed me to do a presentation. They invited me back. They provided some referrals, and now we've served over 600 students so far, and we're in 3 schools, and we're looking to, we just closed a deal with the Brooklyn Public Library to be able to provide training to an additional, really the additional few schools in New York City. So we're going to start with about 5 schools, and we're going to slowly ramp it up with these individual life skills based modules that we've been providing. And we're also looking to a number of other things as well, competitions, presentation skills courses, investing skills. And so, pretty much a large number of things. Anything that you did not learn in school, the goal of Applaud is to try to fill that gap to really help people reach their full potential. Because if you're searching and trying to figure out how to do all these things, you're not going to really be moving the needle forward as far as your own potential, because you're trying to fill gaps and things that you really feel that you should have learned already. So that was, so Applaud is currently I'm still working with Applaud. More recently, at the beginning of this year, I wanted to get into the restaurant business. I thought that was a very interesting sector to be in. I also, like to eat as well. So I figured, it'd be a good way to, have a restaurant. I can get, as much food as I want, and I can also help people, share my love for food. So I acquired a restaurant in February of 2020. The only problem, I had no idea that we'd have COVID, which provided a big challenge to restaurants for sit-down eating. But oddly enough, we were actually doing phenomenal. We were able to revamp our business model to focus solely on online ordering. And, we're currently in the process of trying to structure that and trying to get a little bit more of those payroll protection plan grants to expand the business, and really looking forward to trying to plan for a new location sometime by the end of next year, an additional location. The most recent project that I've been working on as a result of COVID, as you know, there's so many people that are out of work, right? There are a lot of people in the service sector, and a lot of these jobs aren't coming back. You take into account the impact with COVID, you take into account the imminent proliferation of automation. And so, you have an employment landscape that is extremely challenging, and that will continue to be challenging over time. And so how do you, so you're looking at about, 15 to 20 million people, out of work, right? So the most recent project that I'm working on, I got recruited by the founder CEO of an engineering consulting company. So now a chief of staff at an engineering consulting company focused on special projects. My most recent project is what we consider, what I'm calling the blue collar boot camp, which is basically in the same way an accelerator works for teaching, basically like a coding boot camps, where you take 4 years of computer science courses and you condense it down into like a 6-month chunk, a 3-month chunk, highly specific, super specific to the role. I want to do that for engineering, for hard engineering, as far as like, electrical, mechanical, and those more specifically suited for the marine motor wind repair, maritime wind development. So wind turbines. In New York City, there's a big plan for, by the end of 2030, is about $60 billion that's going to go into wind turbine development. And so being able to create a platform to provide training for folks that are, previously unemployed due to COVID, that do not have any employment opportunities, I think is very interesting, and a very, at least for me, it provides me a good amount of fulfillment to be able to help and to be able to be a part of a new and very high growth industry that will be coming up in the next few years. So all in all, I think it's a bit of a non-traditional path, and as far as how I started and kind of where I am now. But I think one of the 3 big takeaways that if you were really to really try to take anything away, I think there are 3 things that you should really focus on. For a student that's in college, how does it relate to you, right? So number 1, I think the first thing is that you don't want to stop learning, right? College you know, depending on who you are, it might be really, really hard, right? And so when you get out of college, there's a tendency to say, okay, I'm done. I don't have to take any more tests. I don't have to do anything. But the problem is that, you know, technology is changing so fast. There's so many changes going on in the world that you have to continuously be you have to be a lifelong learner, you know? So college really isn't the end of learning. It is absolutely, absolutely the beginning of learning. It will teach you how to learn. It will teach you how to build those gaps. But then once you get out of college, you can use that same system to develop and fill those gaps for yourself. And that's where the real growth happens. The other thing is that life skills are extremely important. You know, for my folks that are, you know, in Watson, you know, there's a tendency to just focus very, you know, specifically on facts, data, numbers, metrics. But the problem with that is that people aren't robots. People are illogical, people are emotional, and people sometimes, it doesn't matter what you say if it makes sense. It's whether or not they trust their gut, right? And so, you know, you have to be mindful of that. And so, you know, life skills such as networking, such as, being able to relate to someone, you know, listening, active listening, communication, those are extremely crucial. So I would say that, you know, as, you know, if you're an engineer or even if you're, you know, in, you know, SOM or any other field where it's highly, highly technical or highly based on quantitative metrics, make sure that you shore up that other end of your people skills, because that will take you a tremendous way. I can't tell you the amount of people that I know that after college got tremendous jobs based on the network that they had. Granted, you want to be qualified and you want to make sure that you have that technical knowledge, but you have to also make sure that you don't neglect being able to relate to people, being able to understand and communicate effectively. It is so crucial, because if you know everything, but you can't communicate it, it's like you know nothing. So, and the last thing finally was you have to own your own outcomes. And so, you know, when we get out of college, so let me put it this way. Throughout the minute from when you started school up through college, you have been given a number of different milestones to hit, right? You have to, you know, you pass through from kindergarten up through middle school, and then from high school, you go through your SATs, college application, college, you go through your midterms, your finals, you go to graduation. When you graduate and when you're actually working, there are no more external milestones for development. And so what some people can run into, you can run into a problem where you find yourself stagnating, because now you don't have that external, stimulus driving you to improve, driving you to study, driving you to continue to push yourself. And if you don't do it, and so you have to actually create these milestones and create these goals for yourself. And it's a mindset change, really. And for me, it was very challenging the first few months or so coming out of college, because, you know, you're like, okay, what do I do? You know, no one tells you. And so you have to tell yourself what to do, and you have to take it seriously. You actually have to work at it. And so, you know, that was very helpful for me, and just really being able to own that, and really owning and taking full responsibility for my outcomes. And really, you know, it's your career. So, you know, just continue to have you got to have a game plan for yourself. But, you have to have that beginner's mind. You have to continue to just strive to improve. But that was really my, hopefully a short synopsis on, you know, my background. And I really like to open it up to questions from any one of you all to, you know, that if I can help, I'd be very, very happy to do that.
Can I say something?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I just want to thank you for that. That was actually really, I'm just really grateful. It's really inspirational, and I'm not in that sort of field at all with like engineering or business or anything. I think it was really nice to hear about someone's experience from like a whole other lifestyle, and I just really appreciate everything you said. I would like to ask, what were some challenges you faced or risks you had to take in your career development besides COVID?
What were some challenges that I had to face? So you mean in terms of figuring out what I wanted to do while I
Yeah.
was in there. Okay. Yeah, I think the big challenge for me was complacency and how can I combat complacency, right? You know, your first job out of college is generally going to be, it's generally going to be your first experience within the workforce. And so if you're not careful, you can develop you can also you can probably develop like blinders on, you know, where you don't have a good perspective of what other roles are like and what other jobs are like and what other businesses are like. And so you have this tunnel vision and you just believe that, okay, this role is the only role that is for me. And so the biggest challenge that I faced for my career development was complacency. It was fighting that complacency, was trying to get a new perspective for, you know, where I was relative to a number of folks that are in, you know, within, you know, my same demographic, and, you know, where I wanted to be. And what helped me to fill that gap was to network and to talk to people that were doing some of the things that I wanted to do, and but also really having that internal conversation with yourself to really think about what it is that's important to you and what it is that you'll like to do in the future. That'll provide you with fulfillment. You know, in addition to, you know, money is important. It's important to get a good job that pays well. It's important to be able to take care of those practical expenses. But after that, you know, you have to find something that gets you up in the morning. So that, for me, that's what helped, you know, networking and you know, to fight that that complacency that can set in when you're in just your initial role.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Absolutely.
So it seems like you've done a lot, and that's really admirable. So I was really interested with how you went from like talking about how you've started companies and worked in like engineering, and then you went to like opening restaurants just because you liked food. So how do you juggle all of that? I don't know if you did a lot of that at the same time, but it seems like you're always just doing something. So how do you manage your time and sort of balance like a social, personal life and work?
Yeah, absolutely. A great question, Sydney. You know, how do you manage your time? That's $1 million question, right? Well, I would say that for one, that a lot of us, we have more time than we really think we do. You know, one example I would give is if you were working, let's say, even if you're working 16 hours a day, you had a family, you had no time to do anything, but you came home and there's 2 inches of water on your floor, you know, you wouldn't be too busy to take care of that. You would figure out a way to weave that time in, to make time and to make time to fix that issue. And so time is really flexible and it's really fluid and it's malleable. And so, you know, if you, so creating a schedule is extremely important, you know, creating a realistic schedule and iterating that realistic schedule over time to reflect what it is you're actually, you know, what it is you're actually seeing, right? So if I know that I have, you know, and so the big thing is that I didn't start all of these things at the same time. I built them to a certain point where, you know, there was a good amount of progress and, you know, the heavy lifting was done. And so I did one thing at a time, but, you know, just in short succession after it. And so you got to develop a system, and that's with trial and error a little bit, but, you know, coming up with a schedule, coming up with a priority, a fairly prioritized schedule is extremely important. I'll leave you off with some advice that my very first supervisor gave me when I ran into some issues with, like, you know, juggling time management, a number of projects that I had. And so he told me, he said, Rupert, you know, when you're creating a to-do list and a schedule, you want to spend probably about 30 to 40% of your time actually developing the schedule, which is crazy, right? You think like, wow, why am I spending that much time to create my schedule? Well, the reason why is because if you really take the time to make a good schedule, you're going to be, it's going to be a realistic schedule, and it's going to be, you're going to be more likely to actually check off a lot of the things that that you actually had had taken care of, you know? And so if you prioritize the right things, you have the right items on there, that's very, very helpful in trying to manage your time. But it's an iterative approach, it's trial and error, and there are millions and millions of books about time management that are very helpful also.
Thanks
Does
so
that
much.
answer your question, Sydney?
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
No problem.
Rupert, we have a question from Zenzel. Were there any courses or experiences in college that impacted you post-graduation?
Hi, Zell. I would say that the biggest experience that other than the price of the textbook, right? Yeah, I would say the biggest experience that I had in Binghamton, bar none, was working at Upward Bound. I absolutely loved working with those students, and I had no idea how much fulfillment that I would get. And it gave me a reference point for the kind of fulfillment that I wanted, you know, in my own individual career. You know, it's hard to say, like, how did I know that would that would do that, right? It wouldn't, I had no idea. I just went in as a job, you know, for the summertime, and I absolutely loved it. But Upward Bound, you know, absolutely was a tremendous experience for me. Just working with, you know, just 15 different high school students. It was just all testosterone. It smelled like Axe body spray the whole summer. You know, I absolutely loved it. It was awesome. So, you know, Upward Bound, you know, hands down was my best experience.
I have a question for you, Rupert. What has been your largest challenge when starting a business?
So the largest challenge, I think it definitely depends on the type of business that you're trying to do. But I would say starting any business initially is like trying to push a really big boulder uphill, right? And so it's just, you have to kind of get used to the initial kind of slog of it, right? Because there's so much stuff that you have to do individually, you know, whether or not, like, you know, so when you're starting a restaurant, you know, for example, I had no idea how to start a restaurant, right? So I had to, you know, had to look it up first. You can Google search, how do you start a restaurant? But, you know, there's so many things that you have to do. You know, you have to get your LLC, you have to get your business entity taken care of. You have to, there are a number of licensing and permits and signs and upgrades and inspections that you have to have. So the biggest challenging is really just trying to overcome that that initial knowledge, the initial learning curve. But you know, it's over time, you know, you develop, like I said, in college, college teaches you how to learn. It teaches you how to attack problems, and so if you can just attack it with like a beginner mind, attack it with just being open-minded, you'll be able to get through it. Did that answer the question, Tenley?
I'll chime in with a question. Actually, I'll let Sydney. It looks like she's saying, did you always know what you wanted to do professionally?
Sydney, I had absolutely no clue what I wanted to do professionally. You know, when I left finance, I wanted to, initially I said I was going to, you know, do something extremely, you know, aggressive, which was, I wanted to be pre-med and also do electrical engineering. So after my first semester, you know, I decided I'll just stick with electrical engineering, you know, with pre-med and with a lot of those chemistry courses, you know. For me, with engineering, you know, my studying was linear. There was a linear correlation between the studying and my actual test results. With a lot of the pre-med courses, it was not. There was not a linear correlation, and so, you know, I had to kind of work through that. Okay, so I didn't see any. I saw something in the chat, but I think that was.
Yep, I think that all came in. But I'll chime in with a question. One thing we've been talking with employers and alumni in the Fleischman Center is what was the most impactful pivot that people had to make in regards to COVID? Like, so for instance, for us in the Fleischman Center, you know, we went from being an all in-person office to offering a lot more virtual services and things like that. So if there's anything in particular that, you know, you did to pivot into social distancing and things like that, and talk about how you came to that decision and how you adapted to that.
So just to recap, so the question is, how did I guess, pivot in the different projects that I was working on, and how did COVID affect, how did I react to COVID based on these, with regard to these different projects?
Yeah, and I think from our perspective, right, we have like students that are either going into internship or job opportunities, and they like maybe aren't what they originally like interviewed for because they had to make last minute changes, or might look different 2 years from now than they do now. So just to talk a little bit about adaptability and innovation and things like that.
Okay, so I'll go down the list. With regard to the restaurant, initially we wanted to do like a sit down, you know, and give an opportunity to have people sit down and eat. You know, that obviously we can't do that. So you know, that was the biggest pivot of really just focusing and hunkering down and doing a full shift to complete online and you know, come pick up takeout ordering. With regard to Applaud, the way we conduct our workshops are in person. You know, I love doing it in person because it gives me the same experience that I had when I was in Upward Bound, just working with these students. So now we actually had to shift to a more virtual you know, medium, which is it takes some getting used to. It does take some adaptability because you know, it's you have to take turns when you talk. You can't. It's not as fluid as when you're having a normal conversation. And so that was one of the biggest challenges, and especially with schools being closed, and you know, everyone going through really the same thing of you know, this big transition to online classes. You know, having someone come in to provide workshops sometimes does not, it may not be the biggest priority for the school at that point. So it's challenging in, you know, really firming up some of those contracts. Last but not least, I would say with regard to the consulting company, the big challenge was, you know, a tremendous, you know, I saw a need. There was a phenomenal amount of people that are unemployed due to COVID, and I wanted to help. And so I was really trying to leverage my network and trying to find a way to help. And really, that's really a lot of how a lot of these things that I've done started. You know, I just really wanted to do it. I just had no idea how to do it. So, you know, the first step is just to look internally in my network. Is there anyone doing this? And if there is, then I'll reach out to them. If there's not, then I'll reach out, look at someone externally, and I'll reach out to them as well. Or, you know, I'll find a book of someone that's done it, and I'll try to kind of emulate some of those steps to get some kind of progress. So, you know, just really those are the ways that I've been able to do, you know, I've adapted, you know, with regard to a lot of the projects that I've worked on internally. With regard to Con Ed, obviously working from home, that's one of the biggest shifts. And I'm an extrovert, so I love talking to people and I love being around people. So it's so, you know, it definitely takes some getting used to and some adaptability. Okay, I see something in the chat. Did you experience any culture shock coming into the engineering major? If so, how did you get over it? Oh yeah, absolutely. I would say that, let me close this. I would say, yep, there's definitely, you know, I grew up in New York City, you know, so going to school in Binghamton and, you know, central New York, you know, there's definitely a culture shock there. You know, I didn't really have a car until my junior year of college, because I was going up to Oswego and the buses ran every 2 hours, so I couldn't do that, you know. So yeah, the culture shock was there. From a demographic standpoint, you know, there weren't a lot of people within Watson that kind of had my background, but I think that you know, what's really important is that, you know, you try to network and try to be open-minded and try to really expand your horizon with, like, you know, the amount of people that you try to interact with, you know. As you get older and as you get, you know, more into your career, what I find is that people tend to kind of recoil into their own like individual social circles, you know, maybe people that are kind of that share their own similar background. And so, you know, being in Binghamton, it helped me to, and working in Binghamton and working in Oswego and working upstate helped me to be able to relate to a lot of people from very different backgrounds, and really just to be able to be mindful of that going forward, you know.
I wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, Darren.
So I'm an EOP student and I'm currently undecided. I just wanted to know, like, why did you choose electrical engineering out of all the different like engineering majors? Because I'm currently stuck between mechanical and electrical, and I don't know which one to do.
Yeah. So for me, and so Darwin, that's a very that's a common problem that many people have. You know, trying to figure out what kind of engineer do you want to be, right? For me, I wanted to focus more on power, electrical power. I thought that was really interesting. I read a number of books about a number of different engineers. When I was working in finance, I did so much research on different types of engineering. I read a book on a guy named Nikola Tesla. He was like just tremendously, innovative engineer. He actually pioneered AC power, which is like the power that you use when you plug into an outlet. And so I wanted to go along the lines and work in that realm. You know, I wanted to work, with electricity. I wanted to work with, power, electrical power distribution, and really kind of focus more along the lines of like alternative energy. So electrical engineering, power, kind of that's how I was able to pick it out. But it all depends on, what you're trying to do. If I was looking back, if I have a fairly entrepreneurial, I'm very entrepreneurial, I have a very heavy entrepreneurial mindset. I would probably choose like computer science or computer engineering, just because you have like the skill set to be able to launch a business really quick. If I was looking back, like if I was able to go back in time, I would probably choose CS or computer engineering. That would be, that was my, just looking at as far as like where my career is now. I do find some gaps in like being able to code, being able to write programs. I think that's like, it's almost like a second language now, so, that's, so I think it all depends on, project out, a few more years outside of college. What do you want to do? What do you see yourself doing? And try to think of what skill set will give you, what major would provide you with that skill set the best. Did that help?
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Darwin, I'm going to add something to that. Are you on Mentor Match? Are you part of Mentor Match?
I don't think so.
No. So that is a tool that the university has. It allows you to connect with alumni that are in different fields. So if you want to chat with some more people in those two arenas to kind of learn from them what you like and what you don't, that might be another really great opportunity for you.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I'll throw the link in the chat for you.
I saw in the chat, Zinzel mentioned that, those are some skills that you can learn outside of the class if you have the determination. Okay, so I assume that, Zinzel, you're referring to the coding, right? I think that's what, yep, okay. Yeah, it's definitely, you're able to do it outside of a class, but for me, I really wish I spent the time to learn it as much as I did, the power system theory and the other things.
Rupert, what are your top 3 favorite books?
Top 3 favorite books. Okay.
It sounds like you read a lot, so just curious.
I'm gonna pull them off my bookshelf here. Let's see, this one, and probably this one here. Okay, top 3 favorite books. This is absolutely crucial. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Teach you everything you need to know about networking and finding and being able to relate with people. This one, Hard Thing About Hard Things. This is a book, written by Ben Horowitz. He was a Silicon Valley investor and talks about some of the biggest challenges with starting high growth companies. This book really goes into some of the tough decisions that you have to make as a founder, firing a best friend, hiring people, how do you scale, how do you reach out to investors, how do you deal with the different challenges that are associated with starting a high growth startup. This one, my last and final book, 0 to 1, it was actually gifted to me by another friend named Peter. That book talks about startups as well. One big takeaway from 0 to 1, it talks about how there's a mindset of what's called definite optimism, of really defining in your life what it is that you want to do and working towards it. In our current culture today, it's you want to be a generalist. We want to keep all our hats, you want to keep all your options open, have your eggs in a bunch of different baskets. But this one talks about, just really being able to focus your mind and to focus on a specific thing that you want to do, and how to, and really just structuring, having a goal and structuring your life around that goal, regardless of what it is. Those are the three top ones.
I had a question about your, right before you went to college. How do you think that going to college, a couple of years late, influenced you? Do you think it benefited you, or what were the pros and cons of starting college later than others and working beforehand?
I think it helped me. I think it did benefit me because I had no idea what I wanted to do. And even after the time coming into college, I still really didn't know. Working, it gives you a perspective of kind of what it's going to be like outside of college. And so for me, I realized, I was making a good amount of money working in finance, working as a stockbroker. I was the youngest person there, and I was making a salary, making way more than I make now as an engineer. But I realized that I hated it. I didn't really like it. And so I wanted to do something. For me, I realized the importance of fulfillment and how just a bunch of, the additional zeros at the end of the paycheck that you bring home at the end of the day won't really provide you with that fulfillment. At least for me, it didn't. The fulfillment that I was seeking was, I wanted to help people. I wanted to make an impact, and I wanted to do something, at least for me, that was super important. I wanted to make a dent, and so finance helped me to realize that the way you can make a dent is by starting a company. A number of companies came through the firms that I worked at, and they were, and I saw a bunch of them, I saw all of them as they did their presentations, and we helped them get funding. And so that really gave me a unique perspective on really how relatively easy, it's not easy to start, but how relatively easy it was to start a company and get funding, provided you have the right idea, you structure it the right way, you got the right team. And all those are really heavy lifts, but if you got all those together, so that gave me the perspective of kind of what I wanted to, of the general direction I wanted to go when I went into Binghamton, which was, I wanted to power engineering, go into electrical engineering, kind of work something and work in an industry that I feel that I can have a big impact on. That help answer your question, Thomas?
Yeah, that was good. Thank you.
No problem.
I have another question, Rupert. So how did you deal with your transition from being a full-time student to going into the workforce? I know a lot of students have a hard time kind of with that transition. So how was your experience?
Yeah, I think the biggest transition for me was, I went from, while I was in college, I didn't really have any money, to being in the workforce and working. And then now I was, being had a significant income. And so being able to really just balance personal life, different things that I wanted to do, was still making sure that I was still sticking to some of those, the goals that provided me with that fulfillment. Also, it's, the time management aspect was a very big challenge. I didn't realize how much time that I had while I was in college. I thought I was so busy, but I wasn't at all. And, when you actually graduate from college, you realize what busy really means. And, you have a limited amount of time. And so you have to be more strategic with the time, with the things that are important to you, your fitness, your mental well-being, your relationships, family, and things of that nature. So, the time management aspect was a big. I see a question from Zenzel. Mentioned, would you say you always had good self-discipline, or was it something that you had to build? And I would say that I would say I built it over time. And more specifically, when I worked upstate at the nuclear plant, it was extremely important not to make any mistakes. Just to give you a background with nuclear, there's an old saying that goes like, you can't do any work on equipment until the weight of the paperwork equals the weight of the equipment, and so tremendous amount of regulation. You can't make mistakes, and if you do, you get fined, and very heavy penalties. And the problem is that people are extremely busy, and so you have to put out high quality work within a short period of time. So what actually helped me to be able to build my focus was oddly enough meditating. Meditating helped me to be able to focus a lot more on the specific task that I was doing at hand, one thing at a time. And so that really helped me to, and so over time I was able to kind of develop that skill of being able to just kind of really lock in my focus for whatever I'm doing at that specific time, and then kind of shut everything else out. So that was a skill that I learned upstate and that I cultivated as I progressed in my career and I moved down to New York City. You're welcome.
I have another question.
Yep.
All right. So one of my biggest fears is getting my degree, graduating, and not having like a job offer or not being able to find any jobs. So could you give me any tips on like how to get internships while being in school and still studying your major?
Yeah. Tips for internships while you're in school and still studying. I guess the way I did it, I went to the job fair every single year, and I made sure that I used the campus resources that were available, as far as like the resume editing, as far as, the interview prep. I think I didn't take advantage of the LinkedIn profile optimization. I'm not sure if that's still being done, where you got the professional headshots, but really that's really what I did. I focused on the going to the job fairs and applying and speaking to as many people as possible, and really applying to the jobs that were interesting to me. As what would I do now? In Bing, I think looking at the way the employment landscape is now, I think having a personal brand is extremely important now, right? Having an up-to-date LinkedIn profile, making sure that, your social media accounts, are is inoffensive, you don't have anything crazy on, because, these things are recorded for life now, and you can be brought up at any moment. And so just making sure you're cultivating a good professional presence on, your various social media profiles, and finding something that you have an opinion about and really sharing it. I've been seeing a lot of like younger people on LinkedIn create really tremendous followings, and a lot of them were able to snag employment as a result of that. And so I think focusing on building that personal brand, focusing on, you know, your digital presence, and not being afraid to network with people and go into those job fairs, I think that's a good step in the right direction. And hopefully that was helpful. But that was really all I did while I was in college. But I understand the fear, Darwin. But if you're in engineering, chances are you'll be okay to find a role outside, because you know, generally speaking, you know, engineers, I think it's like engineering, nursing, accounting, those positions from a general standpoint are a little bit easier to find employment in, because there's always a need for those roles.
And
Okay, thank you.
I'll chime in really quick that unfortunately we did have to pause our LinkedIn photo booths because of the COVID pandemic. We obviously, when it's appropriate to be closer in proximity to each other, we'll reinstate them through the Fleischman Center. But in terms of LinkedIn optimization, helping build your profiles, our office, as well as many of the other career services offices, you can make an appointment and do a one-on-one review of your account with any of our career consultants.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, take advantage of that, Darwin. Take advantage of all the resources that you have available at Binghamton right now, because while you're in college, they're free. And when you graduate, you have to pay for them. And so you want to do them now while they're free, you know?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have time for one more question.
Drum roll.
Nothing? Everyone good? All right. Well, a huge thank you to Rupert for spending an hour of your time to talk to us. Oh, we got one from Zenzel coming in. All right. What resource at Bing did you find most helpful?
Resource at, I guess, a student resource, Zenzel, is that what you're referring to? Okay. Employment resources, or okay, so I will assume that, I guess you're referring to like student resources. Either of, okay, there are a lot. Yep, that's true. The Career Development Center was very helpful in you know, initially helping me with my resume and providing me with interview coaching. That, you know, that was my main focus. Because when I went into college, my main focus is how do I get a job, you know, from day one. And so, you know, the resources that were available from the Career Development Center, they were very helpful. There was, I think there was a, if I remember correctly, when I was in Watson, I saw a flyer for this, there was like an entrepreneurship group within Watson, like a department within Watson that had this like business plan competition. And I thought that was really interesting. So I actually entered the competition. I didn't win, but you know, I was able to, initially, that was my introduction of like, you know, really going through the whole process of like developing a business plan, of, you know, going through like the market research, you know, looking at the, you know, creating the financial statements and actually pitching the presentation. So I stayed on campus over the summer, you know, while I lived off campus, and, you know, I gave the pitch to, it was like the Broome County Business Development Association, but there was some relationship there with Watson. But that was really helpful in being able to, you know, provide, you know, some of the like a structure as far as like what goes into pitching a company. So those are the two I would say that were helpful.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you, Rupert, again for your time and your knowledge and just chatting with us. We really appreciate it. Yeah.
And I'll provide the, you know, so the website to Applaud is applaud.cc. That, you know, anyone can, you can check out the website, and if you'd like to be added to the newsletter, you can put in your information there, and we'll add you to the newsletter. And if you if you have any questions, with for me as well, you can always shoot me an email, waderupert@gmail.com. And I'll feel free to. I may not be able to respond right away, but I will definitely put it in the queue and respond as soon as I can.